Hey, Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakakodash, double honors to the apostles and the elders who are most known for teaching us his truth, and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquath and the listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Brother Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I kind of wanted to read through a couple precepts in regards to one of our forefathers named Daniel and his example of one of our forefathers who exemplified being profitable in different situations, right? Our forefather Daniel, in the midst of this captivity here, he was in a situation where Nebuchadnezzar, was unable to understand the dream that he had, right? And he was able to give him the interpretation thereof and be able to break it down, right? And essentially, Daniel, he was given what you might call today like favor. He was looked upon very differently because of his benefit, because of his, as a matter of fact, let me define the word real quick in regards to being profitable. So it says yielding, in the etymology here, it says yielding spiritual or moral benefit. It says profitable, it says advantageous, expedient, helpful, in a specific sense, money making, right? So profit is always here. It also says in the etymology a benefit, and it also included a spiritual benefit. It says a gain, growth, advance, increase, success, progress, accomplish, make progress, be useful. So you see, when you go through it and you read, like for example, like Daniel the second chapter, you know, when I believe it was the magicians, they weren't able to give the proper interpretation thereof of what was going on. Daniel was able to actually do so because, as pursuing to Amos, the third chapter, this Lord giveth his secrets unto his servants the prophets. So the prophet was a person who gave not only an insight, in regards to spiritual matters. They were very, very knowledgeable people, right? And Daniel showed himself to be somebody who was very knowledgeable, you know. So it shows you that he was a person who was extremely useful in the eyes of the other heathens, right? And this is just I guess like a bit of an exhortation, a boost in regards to when he thinks about matters about what's it called, matters in regards to um, your day to day, because sometimes we get those sentiments, those feelings of doubt, feelings in the flesh, feeling insignificant, and this is just like I guess a bit of an exhortation to show that okay, our forefathers were actually very, very knowledgeable. They were wise. They were valuable. You know, they were well sought after, right? And this is also to break strongholds on upon ourselves, because we all came out of different worlds thinking that the Israelite man is not somebody who is well valuable and well favored, right? you know Scriptures talk about how one people shall be stronger than the other, right? And Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents, and the plain refers to that, somebody who is essentially morally excellent and upright, right? So I want to go through a couple precepts in regards to Daniel, and Lord's will as always, this lesson would be edifying, right? So this is Daniel chapter 6, verse 1, and it says, "And it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 provinces, which should be over the whole kingdom." And it says, "Over these three presidents, of whom Daniel was first, the first that the princes might give accounts unto them, the king should have no damage." And it says, "Then this Daniel was preferred above the presidents and princes because of an excellent spirit was in him. The king thought to set him over the whole realm, right? So here Daniel is in a situation where, he has a very, very excellent spirit upon him. And when you look at the blueprint and the template of the model of what our people model themselves after, they model themselves after people who don't portray and have an excellent spirit. They have basically the complete opposite, you know, and they glorify this, this degenerate, low culture, low vibration type of behavior, and don't see the benefit, the profit in actually conducting yourself in a certain type of fashion, especially amongst these heathens, because we're supposed to be, this is supposed to be our wisdom in the sight of these other nations. It's supposed to look at us as a trendsetter in righteousness, of course. However, the majority of our people today are seen as trendsetters in absolute wickedness, right? So this is a bit of more of a, I guess, an exhortation as a spiritual, boost in self-esteem, not to think of yourself, because this is the kind of elk and stock and bloodline that we come from, right? So let me get, what's that? Hold on. Let me just duplicate this, and then I'm just going to go to Deuteronomy in regards to a point I just made. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 4. And I'll read down to verse 8. And it says, "Behold, I have taught you statutes and judgments, even as the Lord my power commanded me, that ye shall do so in the land whither ye go to possess it. Keep therefore and do them, for this is your wisdom and your understanding in the sight of the nations, which shall hear all these statutes and say, surely this great nation is a wise and understanding people," right? So this is what makes us, a wise and understanding people, being in congruence or in agreement with Yahweh Bashim El Shai, right? This is what makes us shine, right? Because we're basically as a nation, we're like the Lord's woman, right? But when you look at the way our people and conduct themselves today, heaping after other gods and other gods, it triggers a very low culture vibration, especially that Hindu goddess known as Kali, the goddess of destruction. That is a particular way, without a lot of our people knowing, a lot of our young men knowing, that they portray themselves and carry on that vibration. They don't carry on a vibration of uprightness. They carry on a vibration as complete degenerates, right? So it's no mistake in the way you see the Lord exacts their judgments upon a lot of our, a lot of these YNs, for example, because they don't conduct themselves as people who actually give, a care for how they carry themselves, and how they look at each other, right? So this is verse 6. I'm sorry, verse 7, and it says, "For what nation is there so great, hath the Most High so nigh unto them as the Lord our power? Is in all things that we call upon him for. What nation is there so great, that hath statutes and judgments so righteous as all this law which I set before you this day," right? So this is culture. This is what keeps us, properly cultivated. People might say, "Oh yeah, you're part of a cult," and all that type of stuff. Like, we're coming back to an understanding of how we're supposed to conduct ourselves. This is proper etiquette, and this is one of the main things our people lack, right? This is verse. Oh, I'll read verse 9 because this is very very important. You know, because we model ourselves. Yahweh Shai being that template, right, of how he conducted himself, how he carried himself, right, and the righteous forefathers that also um, go along with that stock, right, that exemplify the righteousness and moral virtue and excellence, and seeing the importance of that, and how the Lord pretty much helped them in particular situations, even in despite the fact they were still in captivity, right? They still had a mindset in towards pleasing the Lord and continuing to uphold a sense of moral uprightness and integrity, right? So this is verse 9, and it says, "Only take heed to thyself and keep thy soul diligently, lest thou forget the things which I with thine eyes have seen, lest they depart from the heart all the days of thy life, but teach them thy sons and thy sons' sons." And these are things that our sons and our daughters are supposed to know. The scriptures talk about how to train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they were old, they will not depart from it. So they have a blueprint of how to actually navigate, you know, how to actually be cultured, be brought up when they get to a certain age, right? So, going back to Daniel here, because he was, as a matter of fact, let me get that word excellent, because it mentioned he was described as having an excellent spirit upon him. And when our people, might think about the Bible and whatnot, they don't think about the importance and the perks of actually doing righteous and being righteous, because our people, as the scriptures say, are very very wise to do evil, but to do good they don't have any knowledge on how to actually do that. When it comes to inflicting pain and pushing wicked vibrations and impressing their own people, they excel at doing that. But to do good, is like talking to a brick wall, right? So this is etymology on the word excellent. It says distinguished for superior merit of any kind. It says surpassing character or quality, uncommonly valuable for any reason. It says remarkably good, outstanding, prominent, distinguished. It says superior, and we are the superior people, and our people forget that. Our people don't know that, or they don't walk in that also, because knowing and walking in it is not the same thing, right? Knowing is one thing, and then actually walking it, as the scriptures say, a man shall be known by his walk, the way he conducts himself, right? Our people don't walk in this particular fashion, walk in this particular way. It says surpass, be superior, to rise, be eminent. Hold on, let me get that word eminent also. Eminent. Let's make this as edifying as possible. Just bear with me. Laptop kind of slow. So it says eminent. It says standing or rising above other places. It says exceeding other things in quality or degree. Prominent, standing out. It says, and Daniel stood out because of his moral excellence, right? Being able to break down the dream. He was knowledgeable. He wasn't just a regular Pookie and Ray Ray. He wasn't just a Dave Chappelle or a Kevin Hart or, every of these low life degenerates. He was very, very prominent in the position that he held. Still in the midst of captivity, he still had a certain level of moral excellence, right? It says distinguished, distinctive, stand out, that's pretty much it. So somebody who's very very so standing or rising above other places, right? So this is how we're supposed to This is how we're supposed to be. We stand out as a people, right? Okay, let me go back to Daniel. I'm just going to read a couple more verses here. And it says, this is Daniel chapter 6, verse 4. And it says, and the presidents and the princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could not find none occasion nor fault. For as much as he was faithful, neither was there any error or fault found in him. Just bear with me. Let me just get my charger real quick. All right, Salakia Hakim. Yeah, I just had to plug this thing in real quick. And where was I? This is verse 5, and it says, then said these men, we shall not find any occasion against this Daniel, except we find it in him concerning the law of his power. Then these presidents and princes assembled together to the king, thus unto him King Darius live forever, right? So they couldn't find any error in him, and this is just, I guess a bit of also an exhortation of how to actually conduct yourself, especially among these heathens, because when they see you're upright, you don't partake in certain conversations, you don't do particular things, you don't smoke, people try and find some type of error in you. They try to see if you can slip up in some type of way, and it comes with the territory. It's just something to also be mindful of in regards to dealing with certain people, but it shows you the importance. The main nail on the head I kind of just wanted to hit was, it shows, there is benefit in actually conducting yourself in moral excellence, being upright, and our people don't see the essentially the value in those things, right? So they don't see the value in proper conduct, and that's one of the main problems, with the mass majority of our people, right? They think, when they hear about the laws are grievous. Now, the laws are very, very important, but at the same time, virtue, conduct, character, it would cause you to move a lot more differently, right? Because we're supposed to be a trendsetter in righteousness. So what I wanted to do, I wanted to just go to read this here. Just bear with me. This is 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5, and it says, and by this giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and virtue knowledge, and knowledge temperance, and temperance patience, and patience godliness, and to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness, charity. For myself, temperance is one of the main things, personally for myself, to constantly to work on, because, if I may share, not to too much about myself, but from mistakes, when you first learn that your own heritage, you try to, you have a very overzealous spirit, right? And eventually you become a lot more tempered in the way, you deal and you conduct yourself. And this is why I'm reading this, because you don't want to be so overly zealous about the law, even though the laws are important, but at the same time, as the scriptures talk about, putting on, therefore, the elect, right? Those different characteristics and fruits of the spirit, to add to your moral bank account, basically, right? So it says, This is verse 8, and it says, if these things be in you and abound, they make you that ye shall neither be barren or unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Yahushua Hamashiach, right? So these things are constantly like, and you have situations where you have to you're kind of put in situations where you have to exemplify these particular different traits, right? You know, it's you might pray about it, and you might be in situations where you have to exemplify being patient or exemplify brotherly kindness, charity. Charity covers a multitude of sins, right? People don't see the importance of this moral excellence, and that's really the main point from this lesson. And also it just serves as a bit of an exhortation and a boost in regards to maturing healthy self-esteem, because when your self-esteem is low, that's when demons are very likely to creep in and make you feel like you're less than a person, right? Because of all these different things of the world you may not have. For example, like I'm just using college education as an example. you know you know if people have these things and you start comparing yourself, you don't want to compare yourselves to a lot of these people, right? And understand that we have an unction, an anointing from the Holy One to know all things, right? And we go into these different accounts to actually keep and fortify your mind, so your self-esteem is essentially on point, so you feel like you can continue to add more of these different virtues, and and abound, basically, right? So that's pretty much it. Lord's will, this lesson, was comforting, edifying, as the scriptures say. When thou art converted, strengthen thy brethren, right? So, anyways, that's about it. Lord's will is edifying. Just thinking about praises, glory and honor to Yahweh Bashem El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.